If you clicked on this video, then you're probably considering buying Rick Ruben's The Creative Act. Maybe you already bought it. Maybe it's been sat on your shelf for a while and now it's dawned on you that it's 400 pages long. You're wondering whether or not it's going to be worth your investment in time. In this video, I'm going to give you a rundown of the book contents, how it's laid out, who I think it's for. I'll also share some of the passages that most resonated with me, and I'll give you my 2 cents worth on whether or not some of the more prominent criticisms are actually enough to put you off reading the book. So to begin with, this isn't a memoir. This isn't a book of crazy stories from Rick's life of working with different artists. It's a book of principles and tools, reflections on how to deal with some of the kind of common challenges that crop up when you're working on any creative endeavor. If this was a business book or a personal development book, it would make absolutely no sense and it would drive you completely crazy. If you've ever read a work of philosophy or religious text, then it will feel a bit more similar to that kind of work. He's meditating on different scenarios that he's been in, problems that have cropped up, and ways of being that help you to overcome those common problems. I think the book is probably most helpful for people that have invested a ton of time in a creative endeavor, or at least enough time to have got stuck a whole bunch of times, because unless you've done the work, probably some of the stuff that he's writing here just isn't going to make any sense. But if you have done the work, then it will probably speak to you really, really deeply. After about 5 pages in, I realized that it was going to resonate with me a ton. And when I'm reading those kinds of books, I'm reading them for exploitation. I really want to get something out of them. I start adding these sticky tabs. At the end of the book, I then wrote up all the quotes and passages that I thought were really inspiring to me in a spreadsheet, and then I prioritized the ones that were most resonant. I'm going to share 5 of them, but it's worth mentioning that these quotes can be interpreted in lots of different ways. But hopefully, if I share some of the stuff that really impacted me, then you'll get a sense of what kind of book we're dealing with. First of these passages is in a chapter called Make It Up. One of the best strategies is to lower stakes. I love this quote because when you're working on something creative, a project, a piece of art, it can feel completely all-consuming, like it is the be-all and end-all. And as a result, you can sometimes get kind of stuck and paralyzed by the weight of it. Sometimes it's better to just lower the stakes, take the pressure off, have a bit of fun, play, mess around, and see what comes from the process. In a chapter called Experimentation, he talks a lot about seeds, the seeds of ideas. And I think that's just a really nice metaphor, isn't it? Because it reminds us that an idea is something that needs time and care, attention, maybe water, a little bit of sunlight. But he has this to say, not every seed must grow, but it may be there is a right time for each one. If a seed does not seem to be developing or responding, consider storing it rather than discarding it. This one just felt so true to me. In my Google Drive, I've got literally hundreds of magic scripts that I've worked on over the past and routines that I've got to almost ready to share, but not quite. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't find a home, or maybe I lost the motivation or interest to keep working on them. If you store them, keep them for later, it might be that you can find a home, that you do get re-energized to work on them. And in my case, whenever I've got a new show that I need to work on, I'll go back into the drive, I'll look through my drawer of seeds, and I'll often find, oh, actually, I do have a home for that one. I'll feel re-energized, and that idea will have found its time. Where was I? So in a chapter called Completion, he says, despite our insecurities, the more times we can bring ourselves to release our work, the less weight insecurity has. This whole YouTube thing is a new creative endeavor for me, and I really don't know what I'm doing. I feel really insecure, and I'm making all kinds of mistakes. Every time I go to press publish, it feels like a big deal, even though almost nobody's watching, which is totally fine. So this quote was just nice encouragement for me. Little by little, if I keep putting stuff out, the insecurity that I feel will start to subside, and that will also track my learning and my skills, and that has something to do with it. Again, the last one is really timely for me. Do what you can with what you have, nothing more is needed. The most creative periods I've had as a magician have been the times where I've had the least materials and the least money to buy stuff. But now that I'm doing this YouTube thing, I can already feel myself being distracted by, oh, what's that shiny bit of kit? I should buy that. Maybe that lens. And I've already got more lights than a hospital ward. Whatever you've got in that moment in time, that is enough to get started. And not having things shouldn't be a barrier to your creativity. let's talk about some of the criticism. So Rick is one of the most prominent figures in the music industry and has produced some of the most successful commercial music of the last 50 years. So it's not surprising that some people are going to raise an eyebrow at some of the things he has to say. I'm sure he's expecting that. He probably doesn't even care. One of the criticisms leveled at him in The Guardian, and that's a respectable broadsheet newspaper here in the UK, was that the book is full of contradictions. And the reviewer sort of sarcastically says, the answer seems to be that it depends on the situation. Well, yeah, it does. Two things can be true at the same time. These contradictions for me didn't jar in the slightest. Creativity is a messy thing with lots of different answers in different situations. I think just as well did. Probably the most prominent criticism, at least for people that are interested in the kind of YouTube and social media space, is from Jacob Collier, who is a musician and a just fabulously creative guy. He was on the Colin and Samir show, which I listened to. And it's interesting because I absolutely loved this episode. His interview was almost as quotable as Rick's book. But I disagreed so fundamentally with his criticism. So one of the main things that he said is Rick's got this quote where he says the audience comes last. And Jacob really strongly disagrees with that for a few reasons. In his view, creativity is not where you're kind of up on top of a mountain, kind of making things in isolation. Great creativity or great work is where you sort of come down from the mountain into the village and you share ideas and stories with an audience. But I think that's sort of purposefully misrepresenting what Rick is saying. I think what he's saying is that we put the audience last in service to the audience, because if we focus on making things that we absolutely love, somehow, and it's a mystery, it seems that those things then resonate more with other people. So if you're looking for something to help you solve a problem, maybe unblock your creativity or help you put words to a feeling that perhaps you've had at some point, then this could be a really great book for you. But if it catches you at the perfect moment in your creative journey, it might just inspire you as much as it did me.